One by one, the 5 Deathworlder cadets stepped into the hush of the simulation chamber, eyes burning with a fierce glint of unrelenting determination. The crowd of dignitaries and admirals lining the observation deck sensed the tension in the air, as if something monumental was about to unfold. No one, not even the most optimistic among them, expected these young humans, these upstart recruits from a planet notorious for its deadly environment, to accomplish what no one else in the galaxy had managed in a decade of trying. But from the moment Cadet Varlick's boot clanked against the polished floor, the possibility of the extraordinary seemed to surge through every console and circuit in the facility, igniting silent hopes and fueling electrifying anticipation. Rumors had swirled for weeks about humanity's bizarre qualities, their relentless cunning, and an ability to adapt under the harshest conditions that left all other species confused. Now, that rumored ferocity would be put to the ultimate test, for this was no mere exercise, this was the same war simulation that had ground down entire regiments of the galaxy's best soldiers over the last 10 years. None had ever triumphed. Yet here they were, 5 cadets, barely out of training, ready to pit themselves against a scenario so vicious it had been labeled unwinnable by many top academies across the cosmos. In that pregnant silence, a faint beep from the control panel signaled the final stage of system boot-up. A hush blanketed the entire observation deck, a quiet so profound it almost hurt the ears. Admiral Sashin, a towering figure of the reptilian Sarek species, couldn't tear his gaze away from the young humans. He had seen so many fail here that his once burning optimism had mellowed into a resignation. But something about these cadets, maybe the set of their jaws, or the confidence in their posture, made his scales twitch in uncertain anticipation. A cosmic second later, the simulation field erupted into a holographic display of battered star systems and ravaged planetary surfaces, a meticulously designed scenario that forced participants to strategize, adapt, and endure wave after wave of relentless assaults and cunning ambushes. Over the next hour, the entire galaxy would watch these 5 humans attempt the impossible. The reward for success was no small matter, they would cement their place in the annals of military history, hailed by many as the new defenders of the fragile peace. The cost of failure, meanwhile, was the usual, harsh disappointment, the knowledge that even the most savage species in the known universe could not crack the puzzle of this unstoppable war scenario, and the continued gloom that had persisted for an entire decade. Cadet Varlick, designated commander of this close-knit band of Deathworlders, turned a final glance toward his fellow cadets, Ava, the demolitions expert with a temper hot enough to melt tungsten. Reyes, the stoic tactician who had never met a puzzle he couldn't solve, Talia, whose keen senses and lightning reflexes were rumored to be an evolutionary gift from Earth's savage depths, and Vikran, an unflappable engineering prodigy who had once patched up a starship hull breach with nothing more than a tangle of cables and raw willpower. They nodded in mutual understanding, not a single word uttered. They didn't need to speak. At the academy, they had bonded over late-night drills and shared tragedies, forging a unity so tight it bordered on telepathy. In mere moments, they would need every ounce of that synergy to conquer the simulation's labyrinth of strategies, relentless onslaughts, and cunning traps that had bested more seasoned veterans time and again. A faint hiss signaled the final seal of the chamber doors, and a disembodied voice, cool, calm, merciless, announced the commencement of the exercise. And, with the faintest nod from Varlick, their attempt to succeed where legions had failed began. Even the cosmic winds seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see if the Deathworlder cadets would truly defy the odds and carve their names into interstellar legend. The first wave hit them hard, lightning-fast starfighter raids materialized across the entire southwestern quadrant of the star map. Reyes quickly identified them as a diversion, meant to draw attention away from the real threat, a hidden dreadnought creeping along the subspace corridor to the east. He barked out coordinates and calmly directed Talia to maneuver their own strike group into a flanking position. Simultaneously, Ava's demolition instincts kicked in, her mind already racing through the potential vulnerabilities in the dreadnought's shielding array. With her voice taut but controlled, she relayed suggestions for sabotage that would require minimal resources yet yield maximum destruction. Varlic absorbed these recommendations with a stony expression, eyes roving across the holographic battlefield to piece it all together. In just a handful of seconds, he issued a crisp series of commands that set the entire maneuver into motion, a perfect synergy of speed and cunning. Vikran, tapping furiously at his console, executed the subtle engineering hacks to redirect power from unnecessary systems, supercharging the cadets' chosen strike craft and enabling them to cut through the void with terrifying efficiency. The watchers on the observation deck exchanged bewildered glances. Seasoned admirals recognized that the cadets had not only anticipated the simulation's ploy but had also responded with an uncanny speed, as if they were mentally leaps ahead of the algorithm's moves. Typically, novice teams squandered precious moments debating their approach. Yet these humans acted like a single organism, each individual skill slotting into place. Shock rippled through the onlookers as the dreadnought was ambushed almost elegantly, battered by precise blasts that crippled its engines and tore into its command center. Another quick volley ended the threat in less than 3 minutes. For a scenario widely regarded as impossible, they had made a mockery of the opening gambit. The hush that followed was almost unnerving. Varlic's team pressed on. No time to revel in their first victory. The simulation's second act was already morphing into being, a labyrinth of orbital outposts that needed to be defended against a swarm of raiders, each outpost vital for controlling the sector's strategic resources. Historically, simulation participants would be forced into a grueling war of attrition here, draining their fleets and morale. But the Deathworlders had an alternative plan. Talia launched a pinpoint analysis, identifying the most vulnerable outposts, while Vikran rigged up a clandestine infiltration of the raiders' comms. Within minutes, Reyes had gleaned enough to propose a counteroffensive that would use the enemy's own supply routes against them. Ava, typically the loudest voice in any discussion, simply muttered approval before focusing her entire attention on rigging timed charges across key choke points, ensuring that when the enemy advanced, they would run straight into her traps. The synergy among the cadets was seamless, even breathtaking. The watchers could only stand there, jaws slacking, as they witnessed, in real time, the unraveling of carefully laid war strategies that had taken the galaxy's top minds years to develop. Within a mere 15 minutes, the cadets had not only held the orbital outposts but had reversed the scenario entirely, forcing the raiders onto the defensive. Entire battalions of virtual ships blinked out under the harsh cunning of the Deathworlders' assault. The scoreboard overhead, which tracked key performance metrics, lit up with improbable numbers, minimal losses, decisive kills, and tactical efficiency that soared off the charts. Admirals began to pace, pressing their comlinks to share urgent observations with colleagues across the galaxy, who were surely tuning in with mounting disbelief. In the control room, the simulation overseers whispered among themselves, verifying that the system had not malfunctioned. But all diagnostics were clear, the humans were genuinely outmaneuvering a challenge that had obliterated countless squads before them. Meanwhile, the cadets themselves did not notice the growing frenzy outside. Their eyes were locked on each new wave of data, their brains so laser-focused on the mission that the rest of the universe had ceased to exist. However, the simulation was not about to relent. Its algorithms escalated tactics with ruthless efficiency, layering sub-scenarios designed to throw off even the most adaptable minds. The cadets suddenly found themselves dealing with planetary assaults on multiple fronts, infiltration missions behind enemy lines, and an enemy alliance forging out of nowhere to threaten the precarious gains they had secured. Varlic didn't flinch. With a quick wave of his hand, he split the team into specialized groups. Talia and Ava spearheaded sabotage operations on the ground, while Reyes and Vikran reinforced orbital defenses, erecting energy shields and dispatching swift fighter wings to contain the spread of enemy forces. Every plan they executed seemed to feed on the synergy of their distinct abilities, an interlocking puzzle that left no gap for the simulation to exploit. By the half-hour mark, the watchers could sense the tide turning in favor of these improbable victors. The simulation's difficulty scaled exponentially, but the cadets kept meeting each challenge with cold, methodical brilliance. Whispers spread among the ranks of the onlookers, could these Deathworlders really do it? Were the stories about human grit and cunning actually true? Admiral Sashin, scales quivering with a mix of excitement and dread, found himself half rooting for them, half fearing the kind of unstoppable force humanity might prove to be if they succeeded. If they shattered the decade-long losing streak, the galaxy would never look at Earth the same again. The simulation's artificial intelligence was far from passive. As the Deathworlder Cadets systematically dismantled one battle scenario after another, it began morphing its tactics in more unpredictable ways, pulling data from every known threat the galaxy had ever faced. At minute 35, an unprecedented multi-front attack unleashed a series of catastrophic events all at once: starship collisions orchestrated by kamikaze drone units, advanced hacking attempts on the human systems, and even the mock threat of a planetary superweapon countdown. Lesser squads, even experienced veterans, might have folded under the chaos, but these cadets thrived in it. They separated the illusions from the real threats with almost unnerving clarity. Reyes locked down the infiltration attempts, his fingertips dancing across the console as he played cat and mouse with the AI's hacking subroutines. Ava joined Talia on the planet's surface to disable the superweapon in a nerve-wracking sequence of infiltration, stealth, and lethal sabotage. Vikran juggled system repairs on the starships while Varlik maintained a masterful overview, orchestrating every detail down to the second. The synergy was so fluid that Admiral Sashin felt a strange pang of awe, as though witnessing a phenomenon that transcended mere discipline or training. It was as if these humans possessed an instinctual bond forged in adversity far harsher than any the rest of the galaxy had known. At minute 40, the simulation introduced a doomsday scenario that no participant had ever even witnessed. The system conjured a newly emergent threat. A shape-shifting alien empire that had previously only existed in theoretical modules, known for its terrifying capacity to infiltrate and impersonate. The Watchers collectively held their breath, uncertain how even the humans would handle an enemy that refused to show its true face. For a moment, the cadets were forced to recalibrate. They pulled back from their offensives, regrouping in secure sectors while scanning for anomalies in the ranks. Tension spiked as multiple illusions sprang up across the star map, each claiming to be Allied forces requesting assistance. One misstep could lead to catastrophic betrayal. The Watchers braced for a stumble. But, once again, the cadets responded with cunning beyond their years. Reyes, in a flash of brilliance, devised a method to confirm authenticity by cross-checking biometric signals, leveraging Vikran's advanced knowledge of enemy infiltration software. Talia and Ava then executed precise sweeps to root out the shapeshifters, surgically neutralizing them before they could sabotage the humans' lines of defense. Admiral Sashin's heart pounded with excitement and something akin to terror, recognizing that these youths had not only adapted but had done so in minutes, where others might have floundered for days or weeks. Time was running out, and the AI was growing desperate. By minute 45, the simulation launched a final, all-out assault. Massive fleets from every corner of the star map converged on the human strongholds, employing advanced fractal weaponry, layered shielding, and wave after wave of drone fighters. The observation deck fell silent again, each spectator gripping the edge of their seat. The kill ratio soared, the screen filling with swirling lights and frantic pings of starships blinking out of existence. Yet amidst the cosmic fury, the 5 cadets remained calm. They had rehearsed their synergy in hundreds of smaller drills, pushing each other to the brink of endurance back at the academy. Now, that unwavering resolve shone through. Varlik set up strategic fallback points, funneling enemy fleets into kill zones. Ava's demolitions took advantage of the swirling chaos, placing meticulously timed mines that culled large swaths of the enemy. Reyes, scanning the chaotic swirl of data, identified the flagship coordinating the swarm's movements, then directed Talia to lead a surgical strike team that bypassed the front lines using narrow slip-space corridors. Meanwhile, Vikran stabilized the humans' own fleet infrastructure, ensuring critical energy lines remained up and running even as the AI hammered their systems with cyber attacks. It was a multi-layered dance, each step building on the synergy of the last. Then, at minute 50, the cadets triggered a sequence that defied belief. Ava had rigged a chain reaction in the enemy supply lines, a carefully orchestrated meltdown that sent fractal shockwaves through the heart of the converging fleets. Explosions blossomed in symmetrical waves, crippling entire columns of the AI's armada. Reyes capitalized on the ensuing chaos by targeting command vessels and relay stations, effectively decapitating the enemy. Talia and Vikran executed precision strikes to seal off any possible route of retreat, while Varlik oversaw the entire operation like a master conductor leading a cosmic symphony. One by one, the unstoppable waves of enemy forces disintegrated, undone by the Deathworlder's relentless cunning and collaboration. On the observation deck, the watchers felt time stretch to a standstill, pulses pounding in their ears. The scoreboard reached an apex of outlandish performance metrics, as if it, too, was straining under the weight of the impossible. In the final moments, the last enemy vessels flickered and vanished. The entire simulated galaxy fell silent. At precisely the 59-minute mark, the war simulation announced total victory for the Deathworlder Cadets. A stunned hush enveloped everyone present, broken only by the ragged breathing of admirals who had been unconsciously holding their breath. It was over, an impossible scenario that had defeated legions for a decade had been crushed by 5 humans in just under an hour. For a fleeting instant, no one dared speak, as though sound itself might shatter this improbable reality. And then, in one collective exhale of awe, the galaxy bore witness to a new legend in the making. Inside the simulation chamber, the cadets blinked at the empty star map, hearts still hammering from the intensity of their final gambit. A trickle of sweat rolled down Velik's temple, and he realized his hands were trembling just a little. Victory or not, the weight of what they had accomplished was only starting to dawn on him. Ava, always the first to break tension, let out a triumphant whoop and pumped her fist in the air. Talia offered a breathless grin, while Reyes simply removed his headset and exhaled deeply, an almost boyish relief crossing his face. Vikran, chest heaving, laid a hand on the console as if thanking it for not giving out under the relentless demands of their strategy. They all exchanged glances that spoke volumes, a silent testament to the bond that had carried them through the simulation's punishing gauntlet. They had believed in one another. That trust, as much as any cunning plan or advanced technology, had led them to this moment of unprecedented triumph. Then came the roar from the observation deck. The sudden wall of noise, a mix of cheers, gasps, and frantic chatter, struck the cadets like a gust of wind. The chamber's doors slid open, revealing Admiral Sashin and a throng of officials pushing their way forward. There was no decorum, no time for formal announcements. Sashin's reptilian eyes glistened with something akin to reverence, and before anyone could respond, he seized Varlik's hand in a firm shake. For once, the old admiral seemed at a loss for words. Cadet Varlik simply offered a respectful nod, equally unsure how to handle the flood of admiration washing over them. Among the officials were ambassadors from various species, each wearing expressions ranging from awe to mild intimidation. After all, these humans had just shattered a record once deemed impossible. For a galaxy that had long looked upon Earth as a curiosity, an evolutionary oddity that survived against all odds, this changed everything. As the cadets were ushered out, reporters bombarded them with questions. Flashes of cameras and the glow of streaming drones made it feel like they were stepping onto a cosmic stage. The questions came in rapid fire. How had they coordinated so effortlessly? Did they use secret technologies? Were they genetically modified? Varlik tried to shrug it off, insisting it was simply a product of relentless training and the unique adaptability honed by Earth's harsh environment. Ava, meanwhile, couldn't resist a playful smirk, enjoying the attention. Talia answered a few queries, her voice steady but her eyes scanning the crowd, wary of the sudden fame. Reyes offered a carefully worded explanation about synergy and trust, while Vikran rattled off some technical details, inadvertently losing most of the reporters in jargon. Behind them, Admiral Sashin acted as a buffer between the cadets and the swirling tide of curiosity. Ever the strategist, he realized that the galaxy's reaction could pivot in many directions: admiration, fear, or perhaps both. The Sarek had long recognized potential in these humans, though he'd never anticipated this level of skill. He invited the cadets to a secure lounge for a debriefing, putting distance between them and the chaotic crowd. There, in a quieter setting, the cadets each sank into chairs, exhaustion and elation warring on their faces. Military brass from several allied species joined them, their expressions a mixture of congratulations and studied caution. After all, 5 cadets had just accomplished what entire fleets had failed to do for 10 years. The strategic implications were enormous. Has the galaxy underestimated Earth's newest generation of warriors? Sashin cleared his throat, addressing the cadets in a voice that tried to sound official but quivered with excitement. He commended them for their brilliance, their unity, and their calm in the face of near-impossible odds. Others spoke up, praising the humans for an achievement that would ripple across every academy and outpost in the known universe. Yet beneath the warm words lay a hint of unease. These young humans had demonstrated a level of tactical acumen and synergy that bordered on uncanny. The cynics in the room wondered if it might spark an arms race, prompting other species to seek ways to match this lethal blend of adaptability and cohesion. But for the moment, such dark whispers remained overshadowed by celebration. As the cadets recounted their strategies and the pivotal moments of the simulation, the officials hung on every word, analyzing each detail. Even the AI engineers responsible for the scenario wanted insights into how their masterpiece had been dissected and defeated. Reyes politely explained how they had used the AI's own intricacies against it, particularly the fact that it balanced probabilities and rarely accounted for the level of calculated risk humans were willing to take. In that lounge, just minutes after they had stunned the galaxy, the cadets felt a surge of camaraderie unlike anything they had known before. They had ventured into the heart of an unwinnable war and emerged triumphant. They were Deathworlders. They had proven it beyond a shadow of doubt, and the galaxy would never see them the same way again. As the hours wore on, the awe surrounding the cadets intensified. Word of their accomplishments spread at light speed across hyperspace comm networks, overshadowing everything else happening in the cosmos. Far-flung colonies paused their daily routines to watch replays of the final moments of the simulation, marveling at the swirling dance of starships, the cunning infiltration, and the decisive chain reaction that had ended the war. Over on the bustling station of Corybus Prime, where merchants from 100 species bartered and argued, massive holoscreens displayed the final scoreboard accompanied by the simple caption, "Victory in 59-27. Deathworlder Cadets make history." Many watchers stood transfixed, recalling their own attempts at the scenario. Some had poured months of training into it, only to fail in the first hour. On the Valorian homeworld, whose warrior traditions were woven into their very culture, entire clans gathered around communal fires to debate how humans had accomplished such a feat. Could it be replicated, or was this a glimpse into the future of interstellar warfare? In the meantime, the cadets found themselves abruptly thrust into a spotlight that was both exhilarating and overwhelming. The Academy announced they would be receiving the prestigious Titan Star, the highest honor bestowed upon those who performed extraordinary feats in service to galactic peace. Invitations from top-rated military divisions and research think tanks poured in. Overnight, their future had changed in ways none of them had anticipated. Varlik, who had been content to follow a conventional career path, now found himself inundated with interviews and sponsorship deals. Corporations vied to have him endorse their security systems, while governments subtly probed if he might consider exclusive consulting on advanced war simulations. Ava, though initially reveling in the attention, began to chafe under the ceaseless demands. Everyone wanted a piece of her for some new demonstration or high-profile event. She'd always thrived on adrenaline, but the glare of publicity was a different beast altogether. Reyes quietly wrestled with the moral implications of their success. Though a part of him was thrilled at the prospect of accolades, he was uncomfortably aware that their victory might accelerate militarization across many sectors. Had they just opened a Pandora's box by showcasing humanity's combat potential? He confided these doubts to Talia during one of their late-night chats, where they reviewed classified replays of the simulation. Talia, practical as ever, acknowledged his concerns but pointed out that the war simulation was created as a test to develop better defensive strategies. The real threat was out there: pirate fleets, rogue AI expansions, rival empires that had not yet revealed themselves. Perhaps their demonstration would galvanize alliances rather than spark new tensions. Reyes nodded in silent agreement, though a lingering weight remained on his conscience. For Vikran, the sudden fame also brought the pressure of living up to his new reputation as a technological prodigy. All eyes turned to him whenever the discussion touched upon advanced engineering or cyber warfare. He found it both thrilling and daunting. With the entire galaxy asking for breakthroughs, he worried that his next step must be revolutionary to match the hype. His nights became a haze of research and design sketches, fueled by countless cups of synthetic coffee. Yet, for all the bustle and celebration, the cadets remained anchored by the bond they'd forged. In the privacy of a small dormitory lounge back at the academy, they gathered after the day's ceremonies to share laughs, inside jokes, and the quiet relief of still being themselves. They celebrated with an improvised feast of Earth-style pizza and alien confections that fizzed on the tongue. When they raised their glasses, it was not to hail themselves as invincible heroes but to remember the countless hours of sweat, tears, and camaraderie that had brought them this far. The swirl of media attention grew day by day, culminating in an official ceremony where the Titan Star Medal was pinned onto each of their uniforms. The event drew dignitaries from across the galaxy, each eager to witness the moment humans received an accolade reserved for legends. On the dais, as cameras flashed and a million watchers tuned in remotely, Admiral Sashin recounted the significance of their victory. He spoke not just of the fear itself but of the deeper meaning. That when unity, determination, and adaptability come together, even the driest challenges can fall. The applause that followed was thunderous, reverberating through the grand hall. And for a moment, the cadets stood as shining symbols of what Deathworlders, and by extension, all species, could achieve when pushed to the brink. Yet as the applause faded and the ceremony ended, they could not shake the sense that this was only the beginning, and that their story was just stepping onto a galactic stage fraught with both opportunity and peril. Behind the scenes, the powers that be wasted no time capitalizing on the cadets' historic feat. Classified briefings were called in high-security chambers, where alliances and potential threats were reassessed in the light of this new demonstration of human potential. Some officials believed that forming closer bonds with Earth was paramount, lest a future crisis require an army of Deathworlders to stand against a common enemy. Others, more cynical or fearful, argued that humanity should be monitored closely, given their demonstrated capability to upset the delicate balance of galactic power. Whispers spread in covert circles about the possibility of sabotage or even abduction. Kidnapping a mind like Vikran's could change the balance of power in an instant. Word reached Admiral Sashin, who felt an uneasy responsibility to protect the cadets from potential predatory interests, be they political or corporate. The old Sarek had never been so keenly aware of the fragility of peace. After all, history was rife with examples of advanced weaponry or tactics spawning an arms race, and it was only a matter of time before the unscrupulous sought to replicate or exploit what these Deathworlders had achieved. Oblivious to some of these darkest undercurrents, the cadets continued their training at the academy. Fame had not exempted them from daily drills and advanced coursework, though their schedules were peppered with official visits and diplomatic introductions. They found themselves greeted by respectful nods in corridors where, just weeks ago, they were barely acknowledged. Even seasoned instructors seemed hesitant to critique them too harshly, as if they had surpassed the academy's highest standards. But the cadets knew better. Their historic triumph had been a collective synergy, a perfect alignment of skill, trust, and the simulation's vulnerabilities. While proud of their achievement, they understood they were not invincible. If faced with a real war, the stakes would be far higher, and no simulation could fully replicate the chaos of genuine conflict. Reyes's concerns deepened when he received an anonymous message hinting at the existence of a secret faction that aimed to dismantle the Academy's simulation program entirely. The cryptic note suggested that the simulation's success might accelerate tensions with other species to the point of sparking an actual interstellar conflict. Reyes showed the note to Varlik, who frowned, uncertain whether it was a prank or a credible warning. They discreetly shared it with Talia, Ava, and Vikran, who agreed it warranted caution but not panic. Still, the team couldn't ignore the sense that their victory had become a catalyst for forces outside their control. Meanwhile, Admiral Sashin took steps to quietly bolster security around the cadets. He arranged for them to be assigned to a specialized training unit on a secluded moon, under the guise of advanced war college coursework. There, protected by state-of-the-art surveillance and loyal Sarek guards, they continued to refine their tactics, analyzing new data from real conflicts and practicing strategies that might one day prevent a catastrophic war. Despite the secrecy, word leaked out that the famed Deathworlder Cadets were being groomed for something bigger. Rumors flourished. Some said they were forming an elite strike force to quell pirate activity on the frontier, others whispered about a hush-hush infiltration mission into the heart of a rising empire. In truth, the cadets themselves had no idea what the top brass had in store for them. In the stillness of that secluded moon, far from the bustle of the academy, the five continued to support one another as they always had. During one late-night watch, Ava confided in Vikran about her fears that they were becoming pawns in a much larger game. Vikran, hunched over a new design for a hacking-resistant starship hull, nodded sympathetically. Talia and Reyes took turns on guard duty, scanning the perimeter for any signs of intrusion, human or otherwise. Varlik, carrying the weight of leadership on his shoulders, pondered the possibility that their war simulation victory was merely a prologue to a real confrontation. If push came to shove, if they were thrust into an actual conflict, would they hold together under the pressure? The question haunted them all, lingering like an echo in the moon's thin atmosphere. 3 weeks passed in that remote outpost, and life fell into a pattern of rigorous drills interspersed with quiet evenings under starlit skies. Then, one dawn, a coded message arrived, delivered by a Sarek officer whose expression conveyed both urgency and dread. The High Council had summoned the cadets. Events were unfolding on the frontier that required immediate attention, and the Council believed that these 5 humans might be uniquely qualified to help. Unrest had erupted in a contested region known as the Celestian Verge, a volatile stretch of space claimed by multiple species. Pirate raids and sabotage incidents had escalated, threatening to destabilize the region and possibly drag major powers into conflict. Fleets were mobilizing, negotiations were failing, and tensions soared. The cadets were to accompany Admiral Sashin and a diplomatic envoy, who would attempt to broker peace or, at the very least, keep the powder keg from exploding. For the first time, the cadets felt the gravity of real conflict pressing down on them. The war simulation might have been brutal, but it lacked the tangible fear of real loss. Now, stepping beyond the safe corridors of the academy and into a potential war zone, they realized that their skill in a simulated environment was just the beginning of the challenges ahead. They boarded the cruiser Apex Dawn, a sleek vessel outfitted with cutting-edge technology and reinforced with the best armor Vikran could recommend. The Sarek crew welcomed them with open curiosity, though the tension was palpable. Everyone knew that traveling into the Celestian Verge meant navigating a hotbed of espionage, sabotage, and all-out raids. On the bridge, Varlik stood beside Admiral Sashin, absorbing quick updates on the region's condition. Talia ran through infiltration protocols with Ava, preparing for every contingency from hostage extractions to demolition of illegal weapon caches. Reyes and Vikran pored over star charts, searching for strategic points they might leverage to deter aggression. The entire ship buzzed with a sense of uneasy anticipation. Outside the windows, hyperspace stretched and shimmered, a tunnel of shifting colors that seemed to reflect the uncertainty swirling in everyone's minds. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace near the Celestian Verge, the scene was even worse than the reports had indicated. A half-dozen burned-out hulks of trading vessels drifted near the shipping lanes, their hulls scorched by plasma fire. Debris fields glinted ominously under the light of distant suns, a silent testament to the region's lawlessness. The Apex Dawn sensors picked up multiple unidentified ships lurking behind asteroids or powering down in the shadow of small moons. Admiral Sashin wasted no time dispatching diplomatic signals, announcing their presence and intention to mediate. Yet the only reply was static, followed by more ominous silence. Still, they had come too far to retreat. The cadets readied themselves. This was not a simulation, every move had to be carefully measured. Reyes analyzed the comm frequencies for signs of hidden transmissions, attempting to pinpoint the location of whichever group held enough sway to negotiate a fragile peace. Talia and Ava prepared boarding teams, in case they needed to investigate derelict vessels or provide aid to survivors. Vikran ran diagnostics on the Apex Dawn's defensive systems, ensuring they could withstand an ambush. Varlik coordinated with Admiral Sashin, combining the intel from the entire crew into a cohesive plan. A tense day passed as they scoured the local star system for any sign of the main pirate faction rumored to control the Verge. In the quiet intervals, they tried to push aside the dread that gnawed at them. The possibility of failure loomed large. Out here, a misstep could plunge not just this system but entire regions of space into total war. On the second day, they caught a break. Reyes intercepted a coded message containing coordinates on a rogue planet drifting in the system's outskirts. The message hinted at a gathering of pirate warlords who might be open to talks, if the envoy arrived unarmed. Admiral Sashin hesitated, the risk was enormous. But he also knew that ignoring the opportunity could mean losing the only shot at halting the escalating violence. With the cadets insisting they could handle whatever might come their way, Sashin consented. A small diplomatic shuttle was prepped, its defenses minimal to show goodwill. Varlik, Ava, Reyes, Talia, and Vikran boarded along with the Admiral and 2 Sarek aides. The rest of the crew remained on standby, ready to mount a rescue if things went sour. The rogue planet was a grim sight. Its sky was perpetually shrouded in swirling dust storms, and the temperature was low enough to freeze exposed flesh in minutes. As the shuttle descended, the cadets caught sight of a makeshift base nestled in a crater, its flickering lights barely visible through the swirling vortex of sand and ice. Tension gripped every muscle in their bodies. Even the confident Ava seemed subdued, double-checking her concealed gear and exchanging a final nod with Talia, who tightened the straps on her thermal gear. Admiral Sashin signaled for calm as they exited the shuttle, stepping onto a rocky plateau where a group of heavily armed pirates waited. The pirates' technology was a patchwork of stolen gear and salvaged armor, but their eyes shone with ruthless cunning. Their leader, a scarred reptilian biped named Roxal, spat a greeting in broken Galcom, demanding to know why the envoy had come. Admiral Sashin maintained a regal composure, stating their mission plainly, to negotiate safe passage for trade ships, reduce raids, and explore the possibility of a truce. Roxal listened without blinking, then jerked his head toward a structure carved into the rock. The unspoken command was clear: follow him inside, or leave. Within the structure's dim corridors, steam hissed from cracked pipes and the floor crunched underfoot with shards of brittle debris. The cadets kept a careful formation, flanking Sashin and the aides while scanning every shadow for hidden threats. They soon arrived in a wider chamber where a semicircle of pirate warlords waited. Their body language was tense, their expressions suspicious. The conversation began with hostile demands, each warlord insisting they controlled a different corridor of the Verge and that any treaty must acknowledge their supremacy. Admiral Sashin responded diplomatically, but it was clear this was not going to be a simple negotiation. Even so, the presence of the Deathworlder Cadets had a strange effect on the pirates. Rumors of their simulation victory had already spread, and while it elicited scorn from some, others displayed a grudging respect or at least a wary caution. After all, these humans had defeated an unbeatable scenario in under an hour. That demanded a certain level of fear, if nothing else. Hours passed in heated debate. Threats were exchanged, bargains proposed. Talia and Reyes tried to ascertain the real power players in the room, reading subtle cues in posture and tone. Ava struggled to contain her frustration when a particularly belligerent warlord mocked Earth as a backwater. Vikram distracted himself by analyzing the base's technology, mentally mapping its vulnerabilities should hostilities erupt. All the while, Varlik shifted his stance between watchful observer and occasional interjector, offering compromises or clarifications. He understood that these pirates were not a unified force but a fractious collection of leaders who might turn on each other at any moment. The key was to convince at least one faction that peace, or a version of it, was in their interest. A single sign of trust or acceptance might tip the scales. Then came a fateful moment. A battered cargo hauler limped into orbit, broadcasting a distress call. The pilot reported that a rival pirate group had attacked them en route to the negotiation, seizing vital medical supplies meant for a plague-ridden colony. The warlords erupted in accusations, each blaming the other for the ambush. Admiral Sashin seized the opportunity, pointing out that such chaos benefited no one. If they allowed the plague to spread, trade routes would crumble, and no one would profit. He appealed to their pragmatism: help recover the cargo, share the medical supplies, and demonstrate goodwill. Roxal scoffed, unimpressed by lofty appeals to morality. But a younger warlord, a feline-like being named Karis, expressed reluctant agreement. She had no desire to see entire systems turned into quarantine dead zones. With a shrug of indifference from the others, Roxal proposed a test. If the famed Deathworlders retrieved the cargo from the Marauders, the warlords would consider temporary ceasefire terms. To the cadets, it sounded like a trap, but refusing might demolish any chance of peace. Admiral Sashin looked to Varlik and the others, silently asking if they were willing to risk it. The cadets, remembering the purpose that had guided them from the start, nodded. They had toppled a digital war scenario in under an hour, but this was a chance to protect real lives. Roxal sneered at their acceptance, barking for a pirate guide to show them the route. With that, the stage was set for a perilous journey across the rogue planet's harsh surface, where they would confront not just a band of raiders but the raw cruelty that thrived in lawless frontiers. This time, there were no do-overs, no safety protocols. As they geared up to depart, the cadets braced themselves for a mission that could cement their legacy or end in tragedy, with no second chances. The biting wind howled as the cadets set out on hoverbikes borrowed from the pirates, guided by a scarred mercenary named Threx. The bikes kicked up a swirling cloud of dust and ice particles, forcing Ava to tuck her face deeper into her helmet. The plan was simple in theory: follow the coordinates of the cargo hauler's distress signal, locate the Marauder's hideout, retrieve or secure the medical supplies, and then negotiate a truce. But the planet seemed determined to make every step an ordeal. Temperature gauges plummeted, the sun's feeble light filtered through the haze, and the horizon was a perpetual blur. Talia rode point, scanning the rocky outcrops for signs of ambush, while Reyes and Vikram shared the middle, analyzing real-time data from their consoles. Varlik and Ava brought up the rear, occasionally exchanging glances as if confirming that they were still together in this madness. The group's breath crackled over the comms, each exhaling a testament to the hostile environment. Yet, true to their Deathworld heritage, they pressed on. Survival, adversity, and cunning were in their blood. After an hour of treacherous travel, Threx led them to a canyon where the Marauders were rumored to keep a hidden base. The walls rose steeply on either side, etched with jagged crevices that promised countless spots for an ambush. As if on cue, plasma bolts streaked through the gloom, forcing the cadets to swerve for cover. Talia acted first, sliding off her hoverbike and returning fire with well-placed bursts that silenced at least one sniper. Ava let loose with a compact explosive that collapsed a portion of the canyon wall onto a hidden turret emplacement. Reyes and Vikram scrambled for better positions, eyes darting across the battlefield to identify targets. Varlic kept a calm composure, barking orders to flank the attackers. Threx, for his part, stayed low, perhaps more concerned with surviving the crossfire than aiding the cadets. Still, the humans advanced with a coordination that left the marauders reeling. Their synergy, honed through countless drills and culminating in that impossible war simulation victory, now played out in a real firefight. The canyon soon fell silent except for the groans of wounded marauders. Most had fled deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels carved into the rock. The cadets regrouped, each scanning the perimeter for further threats. Vikran took a moment to check their gear. They had plenty of ammunition left, but the environment was draining their suit power faster than expected. Reyes accessed a portable comm unit, scanning for the cargo hauler's signal. He found it, faint but alive, emanating from a cavern system below ground. The only entrance, it seemed, was through a narrow aperture at the base of the canyon wall, now heavily guarded by the remaining marauders. Varlic and Talia took point, creeping along the rocky surface to assess the defenses, while Ava and Reyes devised a plan to draw out the marauders. Vikran stayed back to calibrate a disruptive pulse that could short-circuit any automated turrets within range. It was a precarious dance, each step requiring them to adapt to new threats. At any moment, the entire marauder force could converge on them. With a nod from Varlic, the plan went into action. Ava set off a series of small charges along the canyon lip, creating the illusion of a larger force attacking from multiple angles. Panicked, the marauders at the cavern entrance rushed out to confront the perceived threat. Talia and Varlic seized the opening, sliding down from their vantage point to neutralize the few guards who stayed behind. A flurry of shots lit the gloom, but the cadets worked with near telepathic unity, covering each other's blind spots and pressing forward. Within minutes, they had secured the entrance. Reyes and Vikran joined them, scanning for booby traps or hidden defenses. The path now lay open to the underground complex where the cargo hauler's medical supplies were presumably stashed. Each cadet steeled themselves for the unknown horrors that might lie ahead, reminded at every turn that this was a battlefield of flesh and blood, not pixels and code. They delved into the cavern, its walls illuminated by flickering lights powered by jury-rigged generators. The smell of damp stone and burnt wiring filled the air. Whispered voices and shuffling footsteps echoed in the distance, hinting at the presence of more marauders. Step by careful step, they advanced, their weapons ready, their senses on high alert. Vikran's disruptive pulse had already incapacitated some turrets, their whirring motors are now silent. But the deeper they went, the more labyrinthine the passageways became, twisting and branching without rhyme or reason. Talia took the lead, guided by her keen sense of direction and uncanny ability to spot faint footprints. At last, they arrived in a wide chamber where battered crates bearing the insignia of a medical foundation were piled haphazardly. The cargo hauler's pilot lay slumped against one crate, breathing shallowly. Blood stained his jacket. The marauders guarding him were caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the Deathworlders, and a brief but brutal firefight erupted. Plasma scorched the crates, sending up clouds of acrid smoke, but the cadets held their ground. Reyes and Ava provided covering fire while Varlic and Talia advanced. Vikran hurled a makeshift EMP grenade to knock out the marauders' communications. In mere minutes, the chamber was secure, and the surviving marauders fled into the darkness. In the aftermath, the cadets rushed to the wounded pilot. He coughed, wincing, but managed to convey that the medical supplies were meant for a colony on the far side of the verge, ravaged by an epidemic no advanced cure could stop. Without the cargo, thousands would perish and violence would only escalate. Ava and Talia immediately got to work patching him up. Reyes checked the crates, confirming that the supplies were intact but needed immediate transport to remain viable. Varlic glanced at Vikran, who nodded, understanding the unspoken question: could they get a ship ready, even in this hostile territory? Yes, if they moved fast. The cadets escorted the pilot and the crates back through the maze, re-emerging into the canyon under a pallid sky. Amazingly, Threx was still waiting by the hoverbikes, albeit hidden behind a boulder. Upon seeing them alive and loaded with supplies, his mercenary eyes flickered with a mix of relief and grudging respect. The group made haste back to the shuttle, uncertain if the marauders would rally for a second attack. Sand lashed their gear, ice crystals stung their cheeks, but the cadets pressed on with the same grim determination that had carried them through the war simulation. Only this time, they weren't gunning for a high score or a record. They were fighting to save lives that hung in the balance. At the makeshift pirate base, Roxal and Karis were waiting, their demeanor far less hostile now that the humans had done what they promised. Karis inspected the crates, verifying the precious cargo. Even Roxal, with all his bluster, could not deny the significance of the deed. While he refused to speak of an official truce, he offered a reluctant pledge to halt attacks on any vessel carrying medical supplies, a small step, but a crucial one. Admiral Sashin pressed for more, gently but firmly, pointing out that the Celestians had more to gain from cooperation than endless conflict. For the first time, the warlord seemed to consider a fragile alliance. The cadets stood by, weapons holstered but ready, their expressions reflecting neither gloating nor submission. This was the real test of their worth. Could they help broker peace, however tenuous, in a region that thrived on lawlessness? After a tense negotiation that stretched into the night, an agreement was reached, safe passage for relief convoys, open channels for further talks, and a provisional ceasefire that would allow the local population to recover. It was a far cry from lasting harmony, but it was a start. By the time they returned to the apex dawn was breaking over the rogue planet's horizon, painting the dust storms in shades of crimson and gold. The cadets felt a wave of relief wash over them as they lifted off, the weight of the mission still heavy on their shoulders. In the ship's med bay, they ensured the wounded pilot received proper care, while the crates of supplies were transferred to a secure hold. Admiral Sashin patted Varlik on the back, gratitude shining in his reptilian eyes. His voice was hushed when he spoke, but the words carried immense respect. They had done more than replicate a victory from a simulation. They had shown compassion, bravery, and a willingness to risk it all for a greater good. Word of their success would travel quickly, likely bringing them new admirers and new enemies in equal measure. When they finally set a course back for the main system, the cadets collapsed in a shared bunk area, exhaustion seeping into their bones. Ava let out a shaky laugh, remarking that this was far more exhausting than any unwinnable scenario they'd faced in the Academy's polished simulation chamber. Talia nodded, peeling off her gloves to reveal bruised knuckles. Reyes stared at the ceiling, lost in thought about how one small act of altruism might change the shape of the Verge, and the galaxy's perception of humans. Vikram mumbled something about writing a full report on the technical aspects of the mission, but his words were slurred with fatigue, and soon his eyes drifted shut. Varlik sat with his back against the wall, gaze unfocused, remembering the terror in the pilot's eyes and the fleeting look of hope on Karis's feline features as the supplies were delivered. They might have shattered a legendary war simulation in under 60 minutes, but out here, in the expanses of real conflict, victory was more than just a scoreboard reading. It was the subtle shift of a pirate's mind, the survival of a wounded stranger, and the fragile promise that tomorrow might be less bloody than today. Such reflections lingered in the cadets' thoughts as the apex dawn merged into hyperspace, leaving the lawless planet behind. Their story would be told and retold across the galaxy, the Deathworlder Cadets who had crushed a decade-long war simulation in under an hour, only to step beyond the realm of digital illusions and confront genuine peril with the same unyielding spirit. This was the HFY Galactic Odyssey that shaped them into something more than mere legends. They had proven their might, their cunning, and above all, their willingness to fight for a cause larger than themselves. In the swirling corridors of hyperspace, lulled by the hum of engines, they drifted into restless dreams of uncertain futures. Each carried a piece of the responsibility they now shouldered, a burden born not just of extraordinary triumph but of the complex reality of galactic life. And as they slept, the galaxy turned its eye upon Earth, that infamous death world, now recognized as the cradle of heroes who might one day tip the balance of power. The Academy would hail them as exemplars, the frontier would whisper their names, and their story would stand as a testament to the improbable synergy of trust, audacity, and resilience that dwelled within them. No matter what storms lay ahead, one truth was already etched in the annals of history: once Deathworlders set their minds to a challenge, not even the unthinkable could stand in their way.